Hello everyone. Today I will be featuring the upcoming Tier 7 Pan-American Cruiser called the Nueve De Julio. Now, originally it's Argentinian, but since there's obviously no plans for such a tech tree to be added to the game, for player comfort it's just added under an umbrella of Pan-American tech tree ships, and honestly that makes a lot of sense. It's our first Pan-American ship in the game though, so hooray for that. And this obviously also means that Wargaming is exploring the possibility of adding other Pan-American ships to the game, which is honestly quite interesting. Also, it might look very familiar to you guys because it's a Helena class ship. The only difference being of course a quite exceptional heel that I will get into later. The matchmaking is tier 8. Not really optimal, a lot of tier 8 ships, but honestly it can always be worse, so we'll take it as we get it. The ship itself, well, as usual we'll start with the survivability, even though you guys will probably be looking at the raw HE damage I'm dealing here, but this is in no way different from the raw HE damage a Helena can bring to the table. Anyways, survivability. It has 33.3k health, which actually means the Nueve is quite tanky for tier 7. Now it doesn't reach Mayoko's incredible 39.2k or even Belfast's 35.7k, but it pretty much edges out all the other cruiser competition, including the premiums. The armor on the ship is not going to win any prizes, however. The entire ship, from bow to stern, from deck to upper belt armor, everything is 16mm. Except the superstructure, which is like 13 or something, but that's not really relevant. So this obviously means guns from 229mm and above that shoot AP are gonna overmatch all the armor. So angling is practically pointless when it comes, well, you make a smaller target, but in terms of mitigating damage, not really useful. It also means, of course, that 100mm HE will automatically pen it, even without IFHE. So even an Akizuki without IFHE, and of course BB secondaries, will deal a lot of raw damage to it, very consistently. On the other hand, the Citadel is protected by a strip of 127mm plating, which is quite good, and angling of course means that you can still defend against Citadels quite well. The Citadel is also very small, barely above the waterline, and only in the central part of the ship. The parts under the turrets are so deep underwater, they're very unlikely to get hit. Overall, I found the only times I found myself consistently Citadel is when I give flat broadsides. Even overmatched Citadels are very unlikely. The rest of the time you eat raw non-Citadel damage, but of course the ship is uniquely capable of dealing and recovering from that, but I'll cover that in a bit. If that description sounded very familiar, it should, because it's basically a copy-paste of the Helena hull. So if you want to look at how the armor shim looks on this ship and what the Citadel looks like, open up the Helena in your tech trees, and that's exactly what it's like. The concealment on the Nueve is quite good. It sits at 10.1 km with a full stealth build, which I always recommend on cruisers. It doesn't quite touch on the absurdness, which is Belfast 8.7 km concealment, but it serves its purpose well. Allows you to push into good positions, allows you to disengage somewhat comfortably without being detected. Your air detection, however, is 6.7 km, even when you're not firing. So that's longer than your AA range, since you have a slightly nerfed AA. So you can be permanently spotted by planes without being able to do anything about it. Note that because of that small Citadel size, I'm quite comfortable giving a lot of broadside to this Cleveland, and I'm happily trading pure HE versus pure HE, because he can't recover from the damage he takes. I have that heal. I will get into that in a bit though. Maneuverability. When it comes to handling, the ship is garbage, honestly. I'm fairly certain the speed on the ship is by far the slowest of all tier 7 cruisers. It only does 30 knots. I mean, even the York does 32 knots. The average among tier 7 cruisers is 32.5, and then there's exceptions that do a lot more than that. So 30 is the bottom of the barrel. The turning circle is also absolute garbage. 810 meters with a rudder shift of 7.3 seconds. That's with the rudder shift module. Even the Mayoko, known as a fairly slow turner at tier 7, turns within 780 meters with a 5.7 second rudder shift. And of course all the others, like ships like New Orleans, York, pretty much all the premium ships, all of them have a turning circle below 700 meters. So you get the idea. 810, not good at all. In comparison to the Helena, even though it's a copy-pasta hull, the Helena actually has a 680 meter turning circle, and it also does 32.5 knots. So that's a pretty average tier 7 cruiser performance. So obviously, even though they copied the hull, they nerfed the parameters quite a bit. Firepower, you've been seeing it. I've been dealing quite a bit of damage here, and it's still less than the Helena though. It has the same 15 guns as the Helena, split across 5 turrets, 3 guns each, but the reload is 10 seconds, whereas Helena has 8.5. So if you think this is impressive, the Helena is much better at it. This is a pretty significant loss in DPM, especially as the Nueve also gives up 1 kilometer of range, sitting at a pitiful 13.6 kilometer of range. Short range like that is obviously going to make it exceptionally vulnerable to large open high tier maps. It does have a slightly snappier turret traverse at 18 seconds against Helena's 22.5, but the actual game impact that the 4.5 seconds of turret traverse does is pretty insignificant compared to 1.5 second faster reload and 1 km extra range. So that's not to say, of course, that it's not a scary opponent to fight. With IFHE bolstering the penetration of these 152mm guns, you can do absolutely disgusting 15 shell HE volleys that deal just raw HE damage. I mean, you saw me deal 8 point something K to that Mayoko in a single HE volley. It's disgusting. It doesn't fire as quickly and as far as the Helena, but it's still not damage to underestimate. The AP, like all low caliber AP, is only mostly useful in close ranges against flat broadsides. And of course, since IFHE powered low caliber guns are so consistent, I usually tend to prefer them unless I get a very juicy AP situations. The AA is once again slightly nerfed compared to the Helena. While it packs a bit more mid-range AA, the Helena is only able to push it, or the Helena is actually able to push its long-range aura out to 6 km just by using the AA range module, and with the AFT the Helena can reach 7.2. In comparison, the Nueve can only reach 5 km without AFT, and with AFT 6 km. And as I mentioned, since the plane spotting range on these ships is 6.7, it means that while the Helena can deny perma-plane spotting by shooting down the planes, the Nueve can't do anything about it. Now that's not to say that this is technically a bad AA ship. It can defend itself and its teammates with defensive AA quite well. It's just that don't expect any Atlanta levels of AA here. It's not gonna happen. And finally, of course, you see something that you've probably seen me utilize quite a bit. For example, the way I boldly fought the Cleveland. I happily traded with the Cleveland, and that is the heal. With the India Delta flag, which gives you 20% healing, and if you spec into Superintendent, as I have here, and using the premium heal consumable, you get a total of 4 charges of heal. This heal can potentially heal you for 799 health per second for 20 seconds, which in total equals almost 16k health. That is quite literally almost half your total health, and you can do it 4 times. So potentially you can renew your ship twice. Potentially. And I say that very clearly, potentially, because in reality that very rarely happens. And of course, in many of the optimal situations for the ship, you're not even being shot at. For example, right now I'm using the island cover to deal damage, and in a situation like this, the Helena would be much better because it has a faster reload. So this is in the optimal situation for this ship, the heal isn't really that useful. And whereas the 16k heal a pop sounds very intimidating and very scary, you don't really get to use them that often. That's not to say that the heals aren't very strong. They are incredibly powerful, and it allows you to fight other cruisers and just crush them, because at tier 7 almost no one has a heal except battleships, and you got monster heals. So suddenly all the nerfs that I mentioned make sense. The terrible rudder shift, the slow speed, the nerfed range, the nerfed reload, the nerfed AA, all these things I'm saying nerfed, 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 all of them suddenly make sense because they are there in order to make the heal not make the ship absolutely ridiculous. It's still very, very strong. Don't get me wrong, this is a very strong premium, but it is quite situational. And it does come with a fair amount of risks and downsides, biggest of them of course being the lack of range. If you end up in high tier maps and you're not able to use cover, having to gunboat in the open, even if you're able to heal, even if you have like surprisingly good survivability in that sense, you only have 16mm armor, everyone overmatches you, everyone deals raw HE damage to you. You are a pretty damn juicy target. And of course, if you get extremely unlucky, as I'm about to get right here, someone will blind fire you. He shot while I was undetected, in case you were wondering. I was still undetected while he fired his guns. And he will score a double citadel. So if you want a prime example of the heal being potential health, that's it. If you get really, really unfortunate, and I mentioned this really, really unfortunate because this is not a Neptune heal. Open up the Helena in your port and you will see just how small the citadel is. It barely extends above the waterline, it's a very small citadel. But even if you get exceptionally unlucky like this, your health, all those heals become completely useless because it's potential health, it's not actual health. And always being able to use that health can be pretty iffy. The game does sadly end in a defeat, not surprisingly, since my team was kind of on an adventure. 151k damage though, I'm quite happy with that, because, well, against higher tiers opposition especially, like the Nueve is disgusting against lower tiers. Don't get me wrong, when you fight lower tier cruisers, or in general against enemy cruisers, this ship is just disgusting. As long as you can dodge the alpha damage from torps, and you don't feed them free citadels, I feel like you can 1 versus 1 pretty much any cruiser in the game, and there's not really much they can do about it. The healing potential is just too monstrous, and IFHE raw DPM is disgusting. Team score wise, I do top the scoreboard with 1.7k XP, but once again it was a loss, so obviously I didn't get the win multiplier on top. Still a pretty decent game. What's interesting is of course in the detailed report, damage received 46k. Now, you can easily get much higher. I mean, that's already higher than my health pool. My health pool is 33, so that's a good chunk higher than that. But you can go much, much higher if you don't get unlucky with the citadels. But actually fulfilling the full potential health that you can get, let's see how much potential health you can get, 64k plus 33. So you can get almost 100k damage received in this ship if everything goes perfect. Basically, you need to hit only fire damage and only flooding so you can heal 100%, and that's technically never actually going to happen. Like, it could happen, but honestly it's never actually going to happen. Still though, the ship is pretty monstrous. Oh, by the way, let me show you this thing. That North Carolina, he only landed 2 shells. He blind fired me 3 times and he only landed 2 shells at the very end, and both of them were citadels. I guess that's that infamous streamer RNG people always tell me I have. Truly, truly the best RNG in the world. Anyway, let me show you guys my recommended build on the ship. I only had a 14-point captain since this is a fairly new ship, but this ship is very, very powerful in my opinion. It has its downsides, but when you can use it to its full potential, maybe even a bit too strong. We'll see about that. As usual, I will start with the modules. Consumable wise, it's pretty straightforward. Premium repair, followed by premium heal, followed by premium defensive AA. Hydro is an option, but honestly, I mean, you get access to the American Hydro, which isn't really much to brag about. So ultimately, I would probably recommend going for defensive AA because it is still one of your strengths, even if it's not that much of a strength. Upgrade wise, turret survival, rudder survival, AA range, and faster rudder shift. The possibility of going acceleration mode exists as well, but honestly I think the rudder problems and turning circle problems are big enough as they are without making it even worse. Captain perks wise, priority target, adrenaline rush, superintendent, concealment expert, and IFHE. Actually, I would probably go IFHE before Concealment Expert, because you got a very competitive concealment without it, and IFHE is such a raw damage increase. Superintendent, the additional heal is nice. It's kind of hard to work through all of them though, but I mean, if you have long games, you will absolutely work through all the heals, but the option of going something like Demolition Expert also exists, so keep that in mind. If for additional points, I probably would skip AFT because I don't consider the AA that important. And there's a possibility of maybe going Survivability Expert, which on a cruiser is pretty wonky, but maybe. Ultimately though, I would probably still go Demo Expert instead, because that additional fire chance is so juicy. And then with the last 2 points, maybe something like the last 2 points. Possibly Jack of all trades, or alternatively just preventive maintenance and expert loader, since the reload is pretty long. The first 14 points are pretty straightforward in my opinion though. Flag wise, flat fire chance, amazing. Nothing is as important as India Delta for the heal though, and other than that, mostly XP flags. You can try to boost the speed a bit, but even with the speed boost, speed flag, you only get 1.5 knots, so you're still gonna be the slowest. If you feel like using it, sure. You might also bolster the AA, but once again, the issue is mostly the AA range more than anything else. Camo, let me show you the premium camo. It's a pretty decent looking ship. Nothing really that special, but it's not a bad looking camo either, so I've seen much worse. That's for sure. Anyway, that was all for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this commentary, and I will talk to you guys later.